Now, the governor not going to remember that song. Now, we told you that freezing deportations for millions of illegals would be a mission. So to help, we're bringing in the missionary man because, well, a lot of you know Mike Huckabee. A lot of you might not know he's an ordained minister and maybe can offer us insight into not so much what Republicans do now, but what would Jesus do now? That's a very heavy burden, Governor. But
yeah,
I will say this, that the president presented it last night, and in his remarks, it just wrapped up in Las Vegas. Do a lot of ministers go to Las Vegas? I digress. But that this is a good, decent thing to do. You agree?
First of all, I'm going to answer that question. A lot of ministers go to Las Vegas. They carry the 10 Commandments in a $20 bill and don't break either one of them.
Well, leaving aside the venue.
But other than that, the Bible is filled with admonitions, not only about being nice to strangers, as the president invoked last night, but also about don't bear false witness. The scripture is explicitly clear that one should not be disingenuous, one should not have guile, which means deceit in one's heart, to say one thing but actually to mean another. So if the president really wants to get in the scripture war, I'd love to send him an underlined Bible with a number of scriptures, and I believe I could help him to understand that some of the things that he's doing are not only outside the law but outside the scriptures, because you cannot just flagrantly resist the laws of man and still say, oh, but I'm doing the right thing.
All right, missionary man, I'll go back into former governor man, and that the political response Republicans should have, because listening to the president's remarks last night, I was thinking, Republicans have to be careful here, because if they come back and say, no, we don't like this, and all, they're going to look heartless. We know all the concerns you raise are certainly legitimate and fair. What do they do, and how did they do that?
Well, first of all, we got to be real clear that we don't come across that we're anti-immigrant, because we're not. What we want is a sovereign country that controls its borders like every other country in the world does.
Then what about all the illegals who are already here?
Well, I think first of all, we seal the border and say we're not going to just have a continued open border. The reason that Americans are not in favor of some, quote, comprehensive immigration is because they know that until you have control of your border, it's not closing it. I'm not in favor of closing the border. Neil, good grief, I want people to come to America, but I want them to come because they want to share the American dream, not because they want to come and change our language, our way of life, and not salute our flag. I think when people come here and prosper from this country, they ought to join me in pledging allegiance to the flag, and they ought to be grateful for this country. That's how America has been built, by immigrants who came here because they wanted to be a part of America, not because they wanted America to change and adapt to them. So, look, let's invite people to come, but let's say, come through the front door. We'll meet you at the door. We'll make sure that you're not bringing a communicable disease or a crime with you, and we'd love to have you, because this is a place where we welcome people.
So let me ask you this, then, would Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the governor-elect of Texas, maybe the governor of Arizona, they're all suing over this, or looking to sue over this. Will that do anything?
Well, it should. It should, because they're going to bear an enormous financial burden as a result of what now appears to be a worldwide y'all come mini Pearl moment, where let's just go ahead and bring them on in and not really do the job that a government is supposed to do. So integral
to you in all this, regardless of where their suits go, is border first.
Yes.
Then we'll address the ones who are here first. The president seems to say, we'll get to the border, let's deal with the ones here first. So my impression is it's a timing issue. Republicans want the border first. He wants this first, get to the border second.
If you come upon an accident and you have a victim who's laying in the road bleeding, the first thing you do is you stop the bleeding. You don't ask them, do they have insurance? And you don't ask them what kind of car they drive. And by the way, would you like for me to read a story to you? So you take care of the acute emergency first. We have a border that is bleeding. You stop the bleeding. Before you can do something about those who are here, you have to do something about why so many have been able to get across without any semblance of legal authority to do so. I just don't think a lot of Americans understand this is not about being anti-immigrant. It's about being in favor of the sovereign borders of the United States and having respect of law.
Finally, I want to ask you, the president signed this, I guess it's twin executive orders, or whatever the equivalent is, on a plane going out to Vegas, not at the Vegas event. Now, I don't know if that means anything. I just found out because he certainly had a friendly crowd there inside, not so much outside. Do you read anything into that? You've done a lot of these kind of orders.
You know, I've signed a lot of legislation. I never signed executive orders, which I signed lots of them, but never that was outside the law, and never as a substitute for the hard work of governing, which means you've got to go to the legislature, persuade, convince, and bring together consensus. This president hasn't governed. He thinks that somehow he is what he said he wasn't just a couple of years ago, an emperor. And that troubles me, not because
Why
he's a
now?
Democrat.
Why is he doing this now, though? That crowd outside, for example,
Yeah.
the outside group, they're angry because they think he's gone beyond his constitutional power. That's something that he said he couldn't do, as you pointed out not too long ago. But this is not going to go down well.
No, and I'll tell you who it's not going to go down well with is a lot of the Democrat working men and women who now, because of the importation of cheap labor, will find it even harder to get a good wage-paying job. Do we not
You're right
understand?
about that. You know, we had a big Democrat union guy in Fox Business last night, which, by the way, the governor, if you don't get it, you should demand. Absolutely.
Demand it if you don't get it. I say that all the time.
Very good. And he was saying he was flabbergasted. Enough already.
Well, in the entire Obama administration since 2009, 6 million jobs have been created. He just now opened the door for 5 million competitors. Think about what this means. This means that a lot of people who on this Friday are taking home an inadequate paycheck to put food on their table now are having to compete with people who were just by the stroke of a pen made legal by a president who didn't want to go through the Congress. That ought to scare America to death.
Governor, missionary man, thank you very, very much.
Always a delight to be here. Thank you.
Same here. All right. Without this, well, guys, misrepresentations were the only ones. Well, guess again.